So I'm going to get real local now with this and talk very specifically about climate change mitigation and adaptation options here in the urban area that we can do in our backyards, in our parks, in urban landscapes. And when we talk about the things that ecosystems can do for us, the benefits that they have, we call those things ecosystem services. So in a very general sense, we know that without vegetation, for example, on Earth, we wouldn't be here. The base of the food chain is plants, and plants provide us with food. That's called a provisioning service. Provisioning ecosystem services provide us with food, with water, with timber, with the chemicals that we use for medicines, things like that. That's pretty simple to quantify. We know how much food we produce on Earth, for example. But there are some ecosystem services which have been more scientifically challenging to put numbers on. The regulating services are the things, when we say that plants on Earth regulate climate, for example, we know that vegetation on Earth has a really big influence on climate, but it's harder to put an exact number on that, to say, if you were to change a certain area of land in terms of its vegetation, exactly how would the climate change? That's a scientific challenge to have to predict. So a lot of research is going into these regulating services, and there's still some uncertainty there. And there's also cultural services, which I think are actually equally important. You probably mostly choose the plants in your backyard for aesthetics, for things like flowers. I plant flowers because I like them. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's an ecosystem service as well. The problem with this framework scientifically is that we know all of these things are very important, but scientists actually work way down here. What ecologists and other scientists measure are not usually the direct benefits that ecosystems have for society. They're what we call the supporting services, or sort of the basic ecosystem processes that go on. So we might measure things like nutrient cycling. Primary production is just plant growth. So we make all these measurements of things that then get a little bit difficult to translate specifically into these ecosystem services. So the scientific challenge right now is to take this huge body of knowledge that we have about how plants work and soils work and the atmosphere works, and come up with real numbers for the benefits that ecosystems have for society. And this framework was developed mostly for natural ecosystems. I work now mainly in urban ecosystems. And when we talk about urban ecosystems, like your backyard, we not only have to talk about the societal benefits of vegetation and soils and animals, but also their costs, because these landscapes are created and they cost you money to create, they cost time, they cost labor, and there are other potentially negative impacts that we want to minimize. So ecosystem disservices are these costs, and there are many potential costs. I'll just call out a few, like health issues or things like allergies, pollen that comes from some species. We want to minimize negative impacts. There are some potential environmental costs that I'm going to talk about today. So if we want to engage in activities that mitigate climate change or help us adapt to climate change, what we want to do is maximize the services that these landscapes provide and minimize their disservices. So that's the framework that we want to work in.